Imagine this, January 1787, Plymouth Harbor. A massive ship is going down fast. Below deck, hundreds of convicts are chained up, screaming as icy water floods in. Every single sailor has abandoned ship, every sailor except one. A young lieutenant who keeps diving back into that freezing darkness, smashing chains with an axe, dragging prisoners to safety whilst the ship literally breaks apart around him. This wasn't some heroic battle. Serwa nomor medals on offer. Just a choice: walk away or risk everything for people society had already written off. That choice tells you everything about Edward Pellew, a man who became one of Britain's most extraordinary admirals yet somehow ended up almost completely forgotten by history. By the time we're done here, you'll understand why his fellow officers called him the most naturally gifted seaman who ever lived, and why his final mission became one of the most consequential naval operations of the entire 19th century. Edward Pellew was born on the 19th of April, 1757, in Dover. His father, Samuel, commanded ships in the packet service. The Pellews were old Cornish gentry who'd fallen on hard times, respectable but far from wealthy. This background shaped everything. Edward wasn't born into the aristocracy with guaranteed advancement. Every single thing he achieved, he had to fight for. And the fight he did, from day one. At just 13 years old in 1770, Edward joined the Royal Navy under the patronage of his father's mate, Captain John Jervis. The lad was assigned to HMS Juno, a frigate heading to the Mediterranean. Now, 13 sounds absurdly young to go to war, doesn't it? By modern standards, it's mental. But in the 18th century Navy, this was completely normal. Boys entered service at 12, learning seamanship through brutal experience. They scrubbed decks, hauled ropes till their hands bled, climbed masts in howling gales. It was sink or swim. Literally, Pellew didn't just survive this harsh introduction, he absolutely thrived. He possessed an almost supernatural gift for understanding ships and the sea. Whilst other midshipmen struggled with the complex mathematics of navigation or the intricate choreography of working a sailing vessel, Pellew seemed to know instinctively how a ship would respond to wind and wave with to position himself for maximum advantage. His superior officers noticed immediately. This wasn't just another gentleman's son playing at Navy life. This was something special. In 1775, tensions with the American colonies exploded into war, and Pellew found himself right in the thick of it. He served in North American waters aboard HMS Bland under Captain Pellew, who became something of a mentor. The American Revolutionary War was different for the Royal Navy. They weren't facing massed French or Spanish fleets in line of battle slugfests. Instead, they were hunting fast American privateers through treacherous coastal waters, supporting army operations in hostile territory, maintaining supply lines across 3,000 miles of ocean. It demanded initiative, quick thinking, aggressive seamanship. Pellew excelled at all three. Then came the moment that defined his early career and he revealed the kind of man he was becoming. In 1778, HMS Bland engaged the American frigate Ranger off the coast of Ireland. Should have been straightforward, the British ship was more powerful. But Ranger was commanded by John Paul Jones, one of the most brilliant naval commanders America ever produced. The battle was fierce and bloody. Captain Pellew, Pellew's mentor and protector, was killed on his own quarterdeck. For the 21-year-old Pellew, it wasn't just losing a commanding officer. It was losing the man who'd shaped his career, who'd believed in him. The grief was crushing, but there was no more time for grief. Only the ship, the enemy, and the duty. Pellew fought on through the engagement, helping work the ship even as officers fell around him. The action was ultimately indecisive, but it marked Pellew profoundly. He'd seen what happened when you hesitated, when your tactics were predictable. These lessons shaped his entire approach to naval warfare. Be unpredictable. Be aggressive. Never give your enemy time to think. Strike fast, strike hard, strike where they least expect it. After the war, Pellew continued serving, slowly climbing the ranks in a navy that was rapidly shrinking in peacetime. Promotion was maddeningly slow without active combat to distinguish yourself. But then came that January day in 1787 that we opened with. The scene was HMS Dutton, a 64-gun ship of the line that had been damaged in a storm and was being used as a prison hulk in Plymouth Harbor. Convicts bound for transportation to Australia were held below deck in chains. When the ship suddenly began to sink, the crew panicked and they abandoned her. The convicts couldn't escape their chains. They were going to drown like rats in a trap. Pellew was on shore leave but heard the commotion. He could have done nothing. No more one would have blamed him. These were criminals, after all, condemned by the courts. But Pellew didn't think in those terms. He saw human beings who were going to die, terrified and helpless. He commandeered a boat, rowed out to the sinking ship through dangerous waters, and he went below into the flooding holds. The water was chest deep and rising. The convicts were screaming, pulling at their chains. The stench was overwhelming. Pellew found an axe and he began smashing through chains and manacles. He made trip after trip, dragging men to the upper deck where they could be taken off by boats. He didn't stop until every single convict who could be saved was off that ship. Dozens of lives were saved that day because one man decided all lives had value. The story spread through the Navy like wildfire. Some officers thought him foolish for risking his life for convicts, but the common sailors loved him for it. They understood something profound. This was an officer who saw them as human beings, not just expendable tools. That reputation would serve Pellew extraordinarily well in the years to come. Sailors would follow him anywhere because they knew he valued their lives, that he wouldn't spend them cheaply. In 1793, when revolutionary France declared war on Britain, Pellew was finally given command of a frigate. After years of peacetime frustration, he had his own ship HMS Nymph, a 36-gun fifth-rate frigate. For an ambitious captain, a frigate command was paradise. These vessels were the eyes of the fleet, fast enough to run from ships of the line, powerful enough to tackle any enemy frigate or smaller vessel. Frigate captains operated independently, hunting enemy commerce, fighting single-ship actions that could make reputations and fortunes. Pellew took Nymph to sea determined to prove himself. He didn't have to wait long. On the 18th of June, 1793, just a month after commissioning his ship, Pellew spotted a French frigate off Start Point. She was the Cielaptre, 36 guns, same size as Nymph. The French ship had been cruising arrogantly in British waters, confident in her gunnery and the revolutionary zeal. Pellew cleared his ship for action with practiced efficiency. As the two frigates closed, Pellew walked his quarterdeck calmly, making small adjustments to sail, and of course, positioning Nymph exactly where he wanted her. The French fired first. Shots screamed through Nymph rigging. Men fell, but Pellew held his fire. Closer, closer. You could see the faces of the French sailors now. Still Pellew waited. His gun captains were sweating, fingers on trigger lines. Every instinct screamed to fire back. But Pellew knew the first broadside was the most important. He'd get one perfect shot before smoke and the chaos made accurate gunnery impossible. At 70 yards close enough to make missing almost impossible, Pellew gave the order. Nymph's entire broadside erupted in one devastating hammer blow. The effect on Cielaptre was catastrophic. Her mainmast came crashing down. Her captain was killed instantly. Her first lieutenant fell moments later. Before they could recover, Nymph fired again, then again. Pellew's drills paid off spectacularly. His gun crews were reloading and firing almost twice as fast as the French. After just 10 minutes, the French struck their colors in surrender. The victory made Pellew famous overnight. This was the first single-ship frigate action of the French Revolutionary Wars, and yet had been utterly one-sided. Pellew was knighted, Sir Edward Pellew at 36. Not bad for a younger son from a struggling Cornish family. But Pellew wasn't satisfied. Over the next few years, he and the Nymph became legendary. He took prize after prize, action after action. His aggressive style was perfectly suited to frigate warfare. He didn't wait for enemies to come to him, he hunted them down. He pushed into dangerous waters where more cautious captains wouldn't venture. In 1795, Pellew was given command of an even more powerful frigate HMS Indefatigable, a 44-gun vessel. In Pellew's hands, Indefatigable became one of the most successful commerce raiders of the entire war. One of Pellew's most famous actions came in January 1797. He was cruising off Ushant with Indefatigable and another frigate, Amazon, when they spotted a large French ship emerging from Brest. She was the Droits de l'Elham, a 74-gun ship of the line carrying troops back from a failed invasion attempt on Ireland. By all the rules of naval warfare, the frigates should run from a ship of the line. They were hopelessly outgunned, but Pellew didn't run. He attacked. The battle lasted all through the night and into the next day. Pellew used every trick he knew. He stayed on the French ship's quarter where her mine battery couldn't bear. He used his superior speed and maneuverability to dodge when the French got a clear shot. It was January in the Bay of Biscay, one of the most dangerous stretches of water in the world. At dawn, all three ships found themselves approaching a lee shore in a rising gale. Now it was a race for survival. Pellew's superior seamanship saved Indefatigable. He clawed off the coast just in time. Amazon barely managed the same. But Droids de Elham, crippled by battle damage and an exhausted crew, drove ashore and wrecked. Hundreds drowned. Pellew had defeated a ship of the line through sheer audacity and seamanship. The victory electrified Britain. But it wasn't all glory. Naval warfare in the age of sail was brutal. Men died in horrible ways. Pellew saw all of this up close repeatedly. He never forgot that every order he gave could result in men dying. That knowledge weighed on him constantly. It made him cautious about spending lives unnecessarily, but it also made him ruthlessly effective when action was required. His relationship with his crews was unique for the era. This was a time when naval discipline was notoriously harsh. Man officers viewed common sailors as little better than animals who needed controlling through fear. Pellew completely rejected this approach. He believed men fought best when treated with respect, when they understood why orders were given, when they trusted their officers. Yes, he maintained strict discipline, but he rarely used the lash. Instead, he used shame and pride. Pellew's crews developed intense pride in their ships and their captain. Other captains were baffled by how Pellew achieved such results without constant flogging. The secret was simple: he treated his men like men, and they responded by performing like heroes. Fast forward to 1816. Pellew was now 59 years old, promoted to full admiral, elevated to the peerage as Baron Exmouth. Most observers assumed his fighting days were over. They were spectacularly wrong. For centuries, the Barbary states of North Africa, particularly Algiers, Tunis, and Tripoli, had operated a brutal system of slavery and piracy. Corsairs sailing from these ports would raid Mediterranean shipping and even coastal towns in Europe, capturing people and selling them into slavery. Hundreds of thousands of Europeans had been enslaved over the centuries. It was a horror that had gone on so long that many Europeans had simply accepted it as unchangeable. By 1816, something had changed in British public opinion. The abolitionist movement now turned its attention to the Barbary slave trade. Public pressure mounted on the government to do something. The problem was nobody quite knew what to do. Algiers was well fortified, protected by hundreds of guns in stone fortifications. The British government decided to send a fleet to negotiate. If negotiation failed, force would be used. They chose Edward Pellew to command the mission. It seemed an odd choice on the surface. Pellew was 59, not in great health, hadn't held active sea command in years. But the government knew what they were doing. If anyone could convince the Barbary rulers to give up the slave trade peacefully, it was Pellew. And if peace failed, Pellew wouldn't hesitate to use overwhelming force. Pellew arrived in the Mediterranean in May 1816. His first stop was Algiers. The day Omar Pasha agreed to meet him. Pellew presented Britain's demands end the enslavement of Europeans, release all current slaves, agree to treat prisoners humanely. Remarkably, Omar Pasha agreed, but Pellew's suspicions proved correct. In late May, an incident at the Algerian port of Buna shattered the fragile peace. Over 200 Italian fishermen and their families were massacred. The British consul who tried to protect them was also killed. When news reached London, the public was outraged. Words had failed. Now only force remained. Pellew was ordered to return to Algiers and deliver an ultimatum: release all slaves immediately and pay reparations, or face the consequences. By August 1816, Pellew had assembled a formidable force: 5 British ships of the line, 15 frigates and smaller vessels, and 6 Dutch ships. On the 27th of August, 1816, Pellew's fleet arrived off Algiers. The city was a fortress. Massive stone walls lined the waterfront, studded with gun batteries. The Algerians had well over 1,000 guns positioned to defend the harbor. Ships attacking would be caught in murderous crossfire. Pellew knew the risks. Ships attacking fortifications were at severe disadvantage, but he also understood something crucial: he had to act decisively. If he was going to do this, he had to commit fully, take his ships right into the killing zone, anchor them at point-blank range, and pound the defenses until they were destroyed. It was insanely dangerous. Ships would be sunk, hundreds would die, but it was the only way. Pellew sent a final ultimatum to Omar Pasha. Tade's response was defiant. He would not release the slaves. If the British wanted war, they could have it. On the afternoon of the 27th, the fleet began its approach. As they entered the harbor, the Algerian batteries opened fire. The noise was indescribable. Hundreds of guns firing at once. Cannonballs crashed into ships' hulls, tore through rigging. Men began to fall almost immediately. But Pellew's ships kept coming. They didn't return fire yet. Pellew had ordered his captains not to waste ammunition at long range. Wait until you're anchored. Wait until every shot counts. HMS Queen Charlotte, Pellew's flagship, glided to her anchorage less than 80 yards from the main Algerian battery. Other ships took up their assigned positions. The entire fleet was now anchored broadside to broadside with the Algerian fortifications, so close you could hear the Algerians shouting. For a moment, there was a strange pause. Both sides were ready. Pellew gave the order. The entire British fleet fired in one massive coordinated broadside. The effect was apocalyptic. Hundreds of guns fired simultaneously at point-blank range. The stone fortifications simply disintegrated. Gun batteries were blown apart. The smoke was so thick you couldn't see anything. The Algerians fought back ferociously. The return fire was heavy and accurate. Ships began suffering serious damage. Queen Charlotte was hit repeatedly. Her rigging was shot away. Men were killed and wounded in horrifying numbers. But the British ships kept firing. This was what Pellew had trained them for. Load, run out, fire, swap, load, over and over and over. As darkness fell, the bombardment continued. The city was burning. British mortar vessels had begun firing explosive shells into Algiers itself. The glow of flames reflected off the smoke, turning everything red and orange. Through it all, Pellew directed operations from Queen Charlotte's quarterdeck, 69 years old. Not in perfect health, standing where enemy fire constantly passed overhead. Shots smashed into the ship around him. Men fell nearby. He never moved, never flinched, just continued giving orders in that calm, quiet voice his crews knew so well. The bombardment lasted over 9 hours. By early morning, the Algerian defenses were in ruins. Batteries silenced, the harbor fleet sunk or burning, large sections of the city ablaze. But the cost had been severe. British casualties included 128 killed and 690 wounded. Several ships were badly damaged. If the Algerians could have continued fighting, Pellew's fleet might have been forced to withdraw. But they couldn't. Their fortifications were destroyed. Their fleet was gone. Their city was burning. They were finished. At dawn, Pellew sent another message to Omar Pasha. This time the Dey understood Britain wasn't bluffing. He capitulated immediately. He agreed to everything. All slaves would be freed. Reparations would be paid. The slave trade would end. Over the next few days, more than 3,000 European slaves were released from Algerian captivity. Men, women, and the children who'd given up hope of ever seeing their homes again were freed. Men had been enslaved for decades. Now they were going home. The bombardment sent shockwaves through the Mediterranean world. The other Barbary states immediately agreed to end their slave trades without requiring military action. For the first time in centuries, European shipping could sail the Mediterranean without fear of corsairs. In Britain, Pellew returned to a hero's welcome. He was elevated to Viscount Exmouth. Parliament voted him for Malsenx. The public was ecstatic. It was seen as a moral victory as much as a military one. But Pellew himself was deeply ambivalent about his fame. Yes, he'd succeeded. Thousands were free because of what he'd done. But the cost haunted him. He'd sent men into a killing zone, knowing men wouldn't come out. The glory felt hollow when measured against that suffering. His later years were relatively quiet. His beloved wife Susan died in 1830, a blow from which he never fully recovered. Edward Pellew died on the 23rd of January, 1833, aged 75. He was buried with full military honors. And then, with surprising speed, he began to be forgotten. Why did this happen? Why did one of the most naturally gifted sailors in British naval history fade from public memory whilst less accomplished officers remained famous? Part of the answer is timing. Pellew's greatest victories came during the French Revolutionary Wars of the 1790s, which were overshadowed in public memory by the later Napoleonic Wars. When people thought of naval heroes, they thought of Nelson at Trafalgar, not Pellew taking sail after in ke-1793. The bombardment of Algiers was spectacular, but it was fought after Napoleon was defeated. It didn't fit into the grand narrative of Britain versus France. Another factor was Pellew's personality. He wasn't a self-promoter. He didn't cultivate political connections or manage his public image. He just did his job brilliantly and he expected his record to speak for itself. That's not how you stay famous. There is also the simple fact that Pellew's career didn't produce one single defining moment that captures public imagination forever. He fought dozens of successful actions, but no more battle that ranked with Trafalgar. His genius was consistent excellence over decades. That's harder to commemorate. Modern historians have begun reassessing Pellew's importance. His frigate commands were models of aggressive, intelligent warfare. His tactics demonstrated that superior seamanship could overcome larger enemy forces. The bombardment of Algiers showed that properly applied naval power could achieve significant humanitarian objectives. Pellew also represented something important about leadership. He succeeded through sheer competence and the force of character. He treated his men with respect and he earned their loyalty in return. He took calculated risks but never gambled recklessly with their lives. From saving convicts on a sinking prison ship in 1787 to freeing slaves in Algiers in 1816, Pellew consistently demonstrated that he valued human life and dignity. He genuinely believed Britain's naval power carried responsibilities that strength should be used to protect the weak and oppose injustice. The story of Edward Pellew matters today because it reminds us that history is made by individuals whose choices matter. Pellew could have walked away from that sinking prison ship. He could have fought sail after more cautiously. He could have refused the mission to Algiers, claiming he was too old or the task impossible. At each decision point, he chose the harder path. He chose to take risks, to push boundaries, to do what he thought was right rather than what was easy or safe. Those choices accumulated into a career of extraordinary accomplishment. We should remember Edward Pellew not just as another name in the long roster of British naval officers, but as someone whose life exemplified professional excellence, moral courage, and the humanitarian action. He wasn't perfect. He had flaws like everyone. But at crucial moments when hard choices had to be made, he consistently chose the path of integrity and courage. That's why his crews loved him. That's why his fellow officers respected him. And that's why we should remember him today. The young lieutenant diving into freezing water to save convicts in chains. The frigate captain closing the point-blank range before firing. The admiral taking his fleet into the guns of Algiers. These were all the same man who believed that skill and courage mattered, that leadership meant service, that power carried responsibility. Edward Pellew's life was a testament to what one person can accomplish through dedication, competence, and moral clarity. In an age when we often feel overwhelmed by vast impersonal forces, Pellew's story reminds us that individuals do matter, that choices have consequences, that courage and skill can change outcomes. So the next time you think about British naval history, remember Edward Pellew. Remember the convicts saved from drowning. Remember the slaves freed from Algiers. Remember the countless battles fought and won through superior seamanship and iron discipline. Remember a man who spent his life mastering his profession, who used that mastery in service of causes he believed in, and who never forgot that the greatest purpose of power is protecting those who cannot protect themselves. That's a legacy worth remembering. That's a story worth telling. And if you've enjoyed discovering this forgotten hero who helped shape the world we live in, do consider giving this a like and sticking around for more stories from history that deserve to be remembered. There are countless figures like Pellew, remarkable people whose names have faded but whose impact remains. Drop a comment below telling us which forgotten hero you'd like to hear about next. Until next time, remember that history isn't just dates and battles, it is the stories of extraordinary individuals whose decisions echo through the centuries.